Okay, we are now recording. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming on this lovely Tuesday. I'll call our meeting to order. This is a special meeting where we are going to be discussing COVID procedures for school opening. We do have one introduction to make, or I suppose, well, yeah, how about one introduction? And then at some point we'll do the entire introduction, but just to make things quick, I want to introduce the new school board member to the Manabascutney School District Board, and that is Davis McGraw. And Davis, say hi. Yay!
Thank you. Hello.
Thanks. And now, are there any changes or additions to the agenda? I have none.
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Next on our agenda, public participation on items not related to the agenda. Hearing none. Are there any announcements? None, thank you. Items for discussion, and that is COVID procedures for school opening. And David sent all of us a couple of attachments about opening protocols as a motion. And Elizabeth, you have your hand raised.
I don't know how to, do I raise my hand on the screen or
No, I think that's good on the
No,
screen.
yeah,
Okay.
on here.
Yeah.
'Cause
Okay.
I see.
I have a number of questions. But my biggest question at the moment regarding the protocol list that you sent out is, David, why are you tracking the vaccination populations of the towns? Because in our town, for example, in West Windsor, our population demographics have nothing to do with the school population demographics. We're more than 60% retired people, and that's, I think we have an 81 to 90% vaccination rate, but it's really not the same demographic as the school demographic. So is there a way that you could get a more accurate way to track, or find a more accurate way to track who is vaccinated? Are you waiting for 80% vaccination rate by town?
No,
Surely not.
no. The
So
town,
why are you relying on town vaccination rates?
yeah, so the town data was really just an interest story, FYI. It had nothing to do with the protocols or the benchmark or any of that. I just thought it was interesting. Now, again, Weathersfield Board had a meeting just before this meeting because they were gonna have a before school sort of open community whatever, and they've made some changes to that based on the town data. But that's not why I sent it out. I sent it out really just as an FYI and interest. And you can draw some conclusions that in some of our towns, and maybe the demographics in West Windsor are a little different, but in some of the towns, you know, you might think that the demographic might reflect the school, but we'll have other ways to determine the school vaccination rate. You know, we're working on that now. Our nurses have access to some of the Vermont Department of Health data. What we do know, and why the protocols are as, I guess you could say, as strict as they are, is we do know that all of our buildings, because the vaccination rate will be by building, all of our buildings are nowhere near 80% vaccinated, which is the benchmark that the state is using. It's not based necessarily in any science, but that's the benchmark that the guidance that came out on August 4th stated.
But just to clarify, nowhere near 80% eligible vaccination, is that right? Or total?
Yeah, no, well, I'm saying that, yeah, and this is an important point, right?
It is.
And this is an important point for the board to consider, right? What the administration wants to do is have 80% of, not the 80% of eligible, but the 80% of the building vaccinated. So that's what we're using. We're not talking about eligibility. We're talking about actual vaccinations to everybody that attends that building.
So in the case of, well, in the case of Heartland and Weathersfield and Windsor, we have kids who are 12 and older who might be vaccinated.
Correct.
But we also have a building that is, or a part of the building that's full of much younger children, as
That's right.
is Heartland and Weathersfield.
Right.
And I am disappointed that our agency of education and our health people haven't said masking for everyone indoors.
Yeah.
Just to alleviate all of this,
I agree.
I
agree.
because if you listen to Dr. Fauci, or it was last week, he said, if you care about children who cannot be vaccinated, you're going to wear a mask.
So here's another question. That was what I was gonna say, is, these are just, these are not, mandates from the Agency of Education.
That's correct.
These are just suggestions,
That's correct.
guidelines from the Agency of Education.
Correct.
We could go universal masking if we wanted to.
You could. Matter of fact,
And we are universal masking for the first 10 days of school.
we are. Well, actually, the protocols that I sent out call for universal masking until we get to 80% of vaccination rate within the building. I mean, that's the implication of those protocols.
But none of those buildings are ever gonna get to 80% vaccination rate,
Well,
right?
they won't until we offer the vaccination to children under 12.
So Windsor is the only one that could, but if the elementary school population is higher than the high school population, no.
That's correct.
I mean, it has to be significantly,
Right.
I mean, the high school population has to be significantly higher than the elementary school population,
Yeah.
right? So it essentially, it's universal masking.
It's universal masking pretty much until further notice. I mean, that's the
Okay.
intent of the protocols.
Okay,
Yeah, that's the intent of the protocols.
thank you.
And in the second memo that I sent you, which is relevant to what you just said, Amy, the state did not decide to mandate. There's no emergency order. I mean, that's just the way we're gonna roll. But what they did say is that school boards, this board, all of our boards, and the superintendent do have that duty of care. So we can set up, much like we do with other protocols around behavior and vaccinations, and we can set up our own policies and procedures and protocols. So Elizabeth's exactly right that we don't have to wait for the state, we can do it. And I will tell you that the Southeast superintendents, I think I implied that too in my email to all of you. We're trying to stay reasonably consistent so that you don't see a huge difference. And right now, all of my colleagues, with maybe the exception of one, all of the colleagues in the Southeast are gonna have universal masking until further notice.
Public.
Right, exactly. Public schools, that's correct. Now, in a town like Springfield, where the high school is self-contained, they'll have a better chance at getting to 80% than Windsor will as a building that has K through 12, or pre-K through 12. So that's gonna be the challenge for us. And our nurses they're great. They're gonna step up again, and they're already figuring out ways to secure the data of the people who are in the building right now. So we'll have that data, I'm hoping after within the next few weeks. And that's gonna be important. I think our staff will be honest about whether they've been vaccinated or not, and I'm pretty sure that we're at 80% of staff. I mean, I think that, that.
All staff or just teachers?
Teachers, all staff,
Okay.
all staff. Yeah,
I've got one more.
yeah, that's
Another
okay.
question.
Yeah,
It says that visitors to buildings will have to be vaccinated. Will they have to provide proof of vaccination?
that's exactly what we want. That's
Proof
our,
of
that's,
vaccination, but not proof of having been tested or, like, I suppose you can't.
that's correct. I mean, if they're vaccinated,
But they'll still mask.
then they, and they'll still mask,
Yeah, still.
but they'll have that immunity. Oh, it's gonna be 100% masking, no matter who you are or what you're doing. But the bottom line is if you're a visitor to our building and you need to visit the building for whatever reason, then you have to be vaccinated.
Okay, Nancy, your hand is raised.
Yes, what I understood from before, or something that came out, I thought that the 7th through the 12th grade would be fairly isolated from the rest of the school, and if they reached 80%, that they could go unmasked. But that sounds like that is not true.
Because there's a lot of crossover in that building in terms of even some of the room usage and certainly the staff, right? A lot of our unified arts, the PE folks, the art folks, the music folks, they interact with all those kids pre-K through 12. So if you're not tech, yeah, the tech department. So yeah, so I think, Nancy, to err on the side of caution, we decided there's just no way to separate that building out to the point where you could have the 7th to 12 do something different than the K through 6.
And there's a question in chat. Elizabeth asked, why do 100% of visitors require proof of vax, but not 100% of staff? Because we cannot absolutely require everyone to have vaccination. However, we can tell visitors, I'm sorry, you have to be vaccinated. There's a difference. Nancy, is your hand still raised or? Anne Marie, did you have?
I actually had a comment, not from myself, but from Jamie Turner. She couldn't be here, she's on vacation. But it was in regards to this. She's wondering how we can require the after-school care people to be vaccinated if we're not requiring teachers to be vaccinated.
Yeah, so again, that's a great question, Anne Marie. We talked a lot about that. The after-school people have to fill out a building usage form, right? And they have to follow what we determine as protocols for the use of that building, because they're private, they're not, it's not during the school day and they're not necessarily school personnel. So we felt that would have to be one of the requirements. I mean, there is that distinction between people who are non-transient, which is your staff, right? That they have to be there. And right now, according to the interpretation of the law that we're getting from our legal counsel, we can't require it. We can encourage it. But then there's also what's called the transient population. Those are the people who come in and out of your building who are there by permit or by permission or by policy. And those people, I think we can hold to a little bit higher standard of care than others, because most of what we can do, we learned last year, we can do virtually. If a parent needs to meet with a teacher, if Four Winds wants to do a project, they can either do it outside or do it virtually or be vaccinated. So we can keep track of that.
What are we doing as far as bus staff goes, bus drivers?
Yeah, bus staff, that, of course, because we contract with a private company, they have their own rules and regulations. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if they're required to be vaccinated, but they're required to be masked. So that'll be universal. And the same thing with the kids while they're on the school bus. And I see another comment in the chat, Amy, from Katie Burke. And it's a good one. Not that they're not all good, but she said she was under the impression that 80% of the vaccination benchmark was going to be determined by someone other than individual schools. Thought that data was going to come from the state. And Katie, you're absolutely right. Secretary French said that the Agency of Education is and the Vermont Department of Health are trying to figure out a way to get that data to us for both students and staff. But right now, that's a promise that they've got to deliver on, but, you know, we want to collect our own data just in case they can't deliver on that promise. But I'm hoping they can, because that would be nice. If that data came from an outside source, I mean, there'd be a lot less judgment on the people who are collecting the data
Right.
here.
Can we require the teachers to be tested if they're not vaccinated?
We can, that's a good question. I don't think we can, but I could check that out. I don't think we can do that, no. Now, we can require, we can require staff who have either been exposed to COVID or experiencing symptoms, right? Because this is what we did last year. We can require them to either stay out 14 days or until symptom-free or get tested. So we can require that if they want to get back within 7 days or 14 days. But I don't think it's a general rule of thumb we can do that.
How robust is your substitute network this year?
You know, that's a good question. We're working on that now. We've been advertising. I don't know if everybody heard that question, but Elizabeth asked about the substitute situation in our buildings. But I think what the administrators are planning to do, much like we did last year, is try to use as much internal coverage as we can rather than bringing in a lot of influence from outside. But we will have some perma subs. You know, we're trying to advertise for those now. We've got some folks who work regularly in our building. You know, I think we can require vaccinations from them, and we will. But right now, that's a question.
So Corey Simons has a question. Are parents considered visitors and required to have proof of vaccination to enter a building with their children?
Yeah, Corey, I think that anybody who's not part of the non-transient staff, in other words, work there, are there because of compulsory attendance laws, like our students have to be there. I think they would be considered a visitor, and they would have to make an appointment, and they would have to indicate to us whether or not they were vaccinated and show proof of that vaccination. You know, what we're trying to do is we're trying to mitigate the transmission rate. The transmission rate in Vermont, as several people have reminded me, is still, it's still pretty low. And, but the bottom line is it's higher than it's been for the last several months. So I think what people aren't sure of, just like we weren't sure of last year as we started, is what happens when you get a large group of folks contained in a building that have to be there by law, and they are in close proximity to one another. I think that's what we're trying to mitigate, that this is not, a bank where there are 3 or 4 people working there.
Right.
You know, we have upwards to 1,000 people in,
And
in Windsor.
it's my personal opinion that I am guessing, I can't take for granted, but I believe that we all want the school to be open. With our kids there on regular, actual going to school Monday through Friday for a set period of time. We want that in-person classes.
Mhm.
And if we care about that, and if we want that to happen, if we want our schools to open, we will vaccinate and we will mask.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line.
And we are here to care for children.
Right.
And that's one way that we show that we care for children.
I mean, I've seen a couple of districts who are starting, we're starting later than most districts in this region. We start after Labor Day with kids. Our staff starts a week from Monday on the 30th. But some of my colleagues have already sent home their welcome back letters. I've been waiting just till we had this meeting, and we have the one more with the union presidents on Thursday. which will be, you know, an FYI, and just, do you see any caveats here or any concerns? But the letters that are being written are saying exactly what Amy said, and I think that's how I would lead this off, that our goal is to keep kids in school. We don't have a remote option this year other than homeschooling through the agency. So the bottom line is we don't want to be quarantining kids daily. We don't want to have to shut down schools. We don't want to have to send kids out to remote learning. It doesn't work for teachers and it doesn't work well for kids. And we learned that last year.
Right.
So the idea is to stay there. And Amy, you said it perfectly. The best way to do that is to be masked and to be vaccinated. That's the bottom line for right now. Until we can assure that we've got enough immunity in that building that we can operate.
There are 3 questions, 2 from Nancy. Were there any positive cases at Summer Academy? And she also asks if there will be a vaccination clinic at our schools. And Katie Burke is asking, is the district participating in weekly surveillance testing offered by the state?
Yeah, let me answer the first 2 for Nancy, and then Angie, you can take the one on surveillance testing, because I think have you been involved in that at all? Okay, yeah, so Nancy, to answer your 2 questions, we did have 1 positive case this summer in the Summer Academy. It was a student. It was not transmitted in the academy. It was transmitted in that student's home, but there did have to be some, some quarantining and some notifying of those families that were affected. And Katie, you did a good job of I think chasing that with the Vermont Department of Health.
We actually didn't have to any. There was no contract tracing necessary for that individual. It was because of the particular situation. So it was handled very well, easily with the Vermont Department of Health and Elizabeth Martins helping us out.
I remember that because I think the student had been out for a couple of days during the infectious period. They weren't in the program, so we didn't have to. Yeah, that I now remember that. And there are, Nancy, vaccination clinics being set up throughout the state. When I send my letter out to parents, I'm going to give those sites. We are on the list to have a vaccination clinic here in Windsor Southeast. It's just that I don't know how they're prioritizing those, how they're deciding who gets it first. But so far, we don't have anything scheduled in our supervisory union for a vaccination clinic, unless somebody can correct me on that. And then Angie, do you want to talk about the surveillance testing?
The only thing I can tell you about surveillance testing is we signed up for it and we haven't heard anything yet. So, the other thing is it'll be available for children ages 5 and up. And it will have to be completed by a school nurse for children between the ages of 5 and 7.
Yeah, so I think the simple answer, Katie Burke, is that we are going to participate in that state surveillance testing, at least initially. We'll see what happens with that. We participated last year. Toward the end of the year, because the rates were getting much thinner, we dropped out of that. But we'll do that, and that is a weekly surveillance testing. It's going to put, again, I think, a fair amount of work and stress on our nurses, but and we are trying to get them. We had the LNAs last year. We don't have those this year, but we do have some additional nursing services that we've been working on that. So we are going to get some help to our nurses.
And Katie, you have your hand raised. Katie Burke.
I did. Sorry. I just decided to put my video on and talk instead of typing it in the chat. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I guess I just wonder if the surveillance testing is a unique opportunity to offer the vaccinated population an opportunity to remain unmasked in the high school portion of the school, if the weekly testing rates provide data that says that the fully vaccinated, the eligible fully vaccinated high schoolers aren't spreading COVID and everybody's safe. I don't know if there's a right answer or a wrong answer at this point, but I guess I'm just asking for people to consider that, because I feel like it's a kind of the method to the madness or one of the outcomes of the testing.
No, I think it's a good point, Katie, and I think that it just also signifies that we are gonna weekly be reviewing, these protocols, and we'll take a look at the first couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. I don't even know when that's gonna start. I think the state's scrambling to get it started as soon as possible. And then we can take a look at that. I think part of it will not only be the surveillance testing with the high school or with the 7 through 12, but it'll be also how well can we isolate them from the rest of the population. If we're looking at that surveillance testing K to 12, which I think is what you're saying, then, and it's not, it's not spreading, then, then we could rethink this and reconsider some of this.
Anne Marie and then Elizabeth.
I'm 100% for everybody masking, but I just wanted to read a comment from Jamie Turner, who's a Weathersfield rep to the board that can't be here. She was just curious as to if children on IEPs would be allowed to be unmasked while pulled out for services, or if there's any plans for that. If there were special needs where, if there might be any wiggle room for, maybe doing it outside unmasked, or using a face shield instead of a mask, just for, students where that would work better.
Katie, do you want to take that one?
Last year, we found it very successful for students to use masks that had windows as well as face shields. But without exception, we had students wearing masks all day. When outside, we were able to unmask at picnic tables and stuff like that. So I think people were pretty flexible to make sure kids got breaks and were able to do it, especially speech, that being one where mouths need to be seen. And individually, it wasn't like global exceptions were made. It was individual basis for kids and what lessons were being done. So there's some flexibility in those individual lessons. But it also too for staff they sort of take turns. So yes, on an individual basis, we've been pretty creative.
And again, much like we said last year, we will encourage all students to be outside as much as possible and as long as the weather cooperates, right? It's been a beautiful summer, certainly a beautiful August, and we're hoping that that is true for September and October, because that will help us a lot. I mean, because I think we are going to have frequent mask breaks, and unmasking can happen outside a lot easier than it can happen inside. And that's one of the things we are going to go. We're pretty much back to a full day of school with maybe 10 or 15 minutes difference in some of our towns, but essentially, we want to provide opportunities for kids to also take a break from the mask, but that'll be done really carefully. And our teachers got pretty good at that last year at lunchtime and, mask breaks. But there'll be speaking about lunch, there'll be no large congregation, of students. We will try to keep kids by pods. We're going to eat in the classrooms at a lot of the grade levels, much like we did last year. That's not Craig's favorite as our food service director, but I think it worked last year. It kept kids in the smaller groups, and they were able to unmask because, again, we just have to keep track of who's where and who's sitting where, so that when it comes time to contact trace, if we need to, that we can do that. That's the biggest part of knowing where kids are at all times is the contact tracing and the transmission. But
Elizabeth.
Thank you, Amy. Can you hear me okay?
I think the owl is going to pick you up.
Just kidding.
What? I can't see you. Where are you?
David, I have read through both documents really carefully, and maybe I was really tired when I read them both, but I've read them both a couple of times. I can't really make out whether you are reinstituting drop-off protocols and whether those are SU-wide or by building. And And if they're by building, why?
Yeah, the drop-off protocols are listed. As a matter of fact, we made a minor adjustment that has not been vetted by the administrative team yet. But yeah, we want to keep the window of drop-off very tight. But at the same time, we wanted to give a little bit of flexibility to the local communities that had some issues. But I think that's something, the SU board, and we're meeting now as an SU board, I think, they have authority to certainly establish, the protocols, but those local boards in the end have to make those final decisions. I'd like to keep the drop-off protocols as tight as possible. And I think that they will be, and I don't know if Anne Marie wants to speak to it, but there's one school that's under a lot of pressure to have a 20-minute or a 30-minute earlier drop-off for a very select number of kids. I think that's gonna have to be a local decision. And do you wanna speak to that, Anne?
Yeah, well, at Weathersfield, we are planning to offer a limited, before school, drop-off program. We're gonna request that people only use it if absolutely necessary. But we did, since it's been a part of our community for many years now, people come to expect it, and we really wanted to do this for the parents of our town because, it's been a hard couple of years, a year and a half for everybody, and, people are trying to get back to work, and we don't want to get in the way of that. So, we are going to have a drop-off of, I believe, either 7:15 or 7:20, but it's going to be, people will need to sign up for it, and it's going to be limited to 15 to 20 students. They'll need to remain masked the whole time and distanced. There won't be any sort of like planned activities like people are used to from our morning program. The kids will have to just sort of sit and perhaps read a book or, bring something of their own to do. We just want to do the best thing that we can at this time, and hopefully we'll be able to get back to our usual morning program before too long.
So, thank you. That sounds great, actually. So the protocol, it will not be returning to last year's drop-off protocol. Is that
Correct. It'll be, well, the protocol will have a drop-off window, right? But if a particular school district, much like Weathersfield, wants to have a very tightly secured.
That's not what I mean. What I mean is, will the students be entering, if a student is sick, will they be entering the school before their fever is discovered?
Yeah, that's okay. That's a little different question, right? Because we dispense.
I didn't mean like times or that stuff.
Right,
I meant
okay.
like the actual.
The protocol.
The protocol. We're talking about masking and all that stuff.
Right.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. No, we dispensed it, as you know, toward the end of last year.
The health check.
We dispensed with the health checks. We are asking parents to do the health checks at home. And certainly if a student is symptomatic, that they stay home.
That's the first one.
That's the first one. And whether or not we can randomly check that as kids, but no, I think the simple answer to the question is it won't be as tight as it was, last year, at the beginning of last year.
And will there be any, I didn't see any mention of distancing at all.
Yeah, there's no, with indoor, as long as, because remember, the distancing is much more around,
Number 13.
yeah, it's gonna be,
Where possible.
yeah, where possible, we're gonna try to do the distancing.
But it
But
didn't
the-
say what distance.
No, but the distancing will not be, mandatory 6 feet in every classroom or even a mandatory 3 feet. Kids are gonna, we want kids to get back to somewhat of school the way they know it. So there'll be some small group work. There'll be some reading corners where kids can go, but it'll be within their pod, very controlled, very contained, and they'll be masked, right? I mean, that's the key. And we'll see how that goes. If we start to get a lot of case count, then we're gonna have to change that. But I think that the administrators and some of them are on tonight. I mean, they really wanted to, they didn't want to take away that distance. You know, they wanted to have some.
Yeah, I know, but here's the thing. Here's my qualm is that we have masks. We have set up the bare minimum of protections for kids who are much more at risk than they were a year ago. The protections that we have right now are lower than they were a year ago, but the kids are much more at risk than they were a year ago. And that really, really concerns me.
Katie, you have your hand raised. Katie Burke.
I just wanted to follow up on what Elizabeth was saying, because I think that is a common concern, and I think it's a valid one. But I think you also have to keep in kind of the forefront in your mind that we have had in the state of Vermont the K-6 population meeting in summer camps, summer academy, summer soak, whatever you want to call it. They were unvaccinated, gathering in groups, masked and unmasked. And our pediatric population, our reported pediatric population of COVID positive cases really didn't budge that much. And so I don't think it's the fix, but I think it's encouraging as we move into the fall. I think everything that everybody's talking about tonight, social distancing, masking, all of that, the surveillance testing is the way to go. But personally, as a school nurse, I'm encouraged with how the summer played out because we were doing summer camp in the face of the Delta variant.
I understand, but look at Waterbury, the Waterbury summer camp, where it's now up to 28 kids who got the virus, and then the same protocols. It just happened that there was an explosion in that summer camp, and so I'd rather win by good management than by good luck. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I have a personal stake in it, and then I have a son who's of the unvaccinable.
Vaccinable.
Making up words.
But so it really, I feel much more anxious this year than I did last year, really.
Yeah.
So also as such, I'd love to know how you plan to quell your parents' senses of foreboding.
Yeah.
I know we're lucky. We live in a remote area.
Yeah.
You know, we probably have the safest possible environment for anybody we know who lives outside of Vermont.
Yeah.
You know, is envious of our scenario, but I still have a sense of foreboding, and
Yeah. And
I don't think it's just paranoia. I'd like to try to, be.
No, I don't think it's just paranoia, but I will reemphasize what Katie said, because we've been looking at that pediatric data, and the hospital's been helping us with that a little bit. And again, we have those exceptions like Waterbury, and I get that part. But that pediatric rate of transmission I think it's still, I don't know, 0.14 or whatever. And I'm not saying that should make everybody feel really good about it. And I'm not so sure as we get closer to the year. Remember, we've got to vet this one more time with our union leaders on Thursday, and there may be some push for more distancing that we've got included in here. We're encouraging distancing where possible, and we just want to be sensitive to the fact that kids will be in masks, and there was a lot of isolation and trauma and social emotional issues last year with some of the kids who really felt that isolation. And I think it's always that balance between how do you mitigate that. And you're right. I mean, I get it.
And I also get, my said son is also suffered a little bit last year, not being able to touch the person who was helping him out. And I know there's balance there, but
it's a delicate balance. Yeah.
But I still think it's not just A or B. I think there's,
There's
a whole
C.
bunch of things in between.
I think there's gray.
Yeah.
I saw,
8.5.
I saw Bill had his hand up, and Brian and Anne Marie.
Does this Bill want to go first, or? I just wanted to ask what we're doing as far as HVAC goes, because I was watching, was an interview with, the person who took Dr. Fauci's place on the NIH, and he was saying that actually more so than, distancing, the quality of the air filtration, that's really the issue. So how up to date are we with, having, clean air in all of our classrooms?
Well, Jim, and this is a credit to Jim and how early he jumped on that HVAC money and got our HVAC systems up and running. A matter of fact, there's a state conference coming up here soon where Jim and this supervisory union is going to get some sort of an award for being a model district in terms of the way the air quality worked last year. And we did do regular tests, and we kept in touch with Control Tech as much as we could. But anyhow, to answer your question, Ann, Jim's going to use those same protocols he used last year, which is why we are not going to open those buildings before 7, and we want them closed by 5:30, because he's still going to use that 2 hours in the morning for blowing fresh air in and 4 hours in the afternoon for taking fresh air out. And also, to Jim's credit and his crew, we're going to use those same sanitizing procedures. We're going to be wiping knobs and surfaces and classrooms. We're going to have sanitizer in every single classroom. So none of that stuff is going to change. And I think you're right. I think that air quality makes a huge difference. And Jim does a great job with that.
I'm sorry. Do all 4 buildings have an HVAC system?
Yes.
All 4 of them do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now they do, and they've all been upgraded.
Okay.
That was a lot of money Jim brought into this district. It was well over $300,000, I know, if not more than that.
Excellent. So Bill Yates, you had your hand raised and then you.
Oh, I moved on with my life. Thank you.
You look way too comfortable, Bill.
Oh, well, yeah. It's been one of those days.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we move on to the motions?
Yeah, if we want to, let me just pull that up for our home viewing audience. I'm going to share a window. And I'm going to pull up the window now. So this is what you're seeing now, if you can see it, is the motion well, it's the memo that I sent to the board. The motion is down at the bottom, which I'm going to get to in just a second here. It's in bold. We did something similar to this last year, only we were under the emergency order. So the board had to decide who in the end, on a day-to-day basis and a week-to-week basis, had the ultimate authority. So essentially what we're trying to do is, given the situation that we're in right now, that first of all, we all agree that we're going to adhere to the COVID-19 advisory memorandums and maybe even, as we said, ratchet them up a little bit. But then in terms of the day-to-day basis, the best way to keep the safest environment for in-person learning is to essentially, because I don't think board members want to have these emergency meetings weekly or every other day, but I think it's just to authorize the superintendent in consultation with the administration to in fact rely, to work on that guidance and adjust the protocols as needed. And we saw some examples just a minute ago, right? That, when the surveillance testing starts, that could go really well or not so well. If we find out that distancing is becoming a problem, then we have to look at it. If people aren't adhering to the early drop-off, we've got to figure that out. We've got good relationships with our parents and with our kids and with our staff, so I'm hoping that we can do this. But really, I'd like somebody to make that motion so that going forward, we have a protocol. And right now it mentions, I think there's a benchmark mentioned in there. And again, we would establish the benchmark, but we've already said that our benchmark right now is we are universally masked until 80% of our building is vaccinated.
I see Elizabeth, you have your hand raised, and then Nancy.
Okay, I have a couple of comments here, and one is, I object to it saying that we commit to adherence to the COVID-19 advisory memorandum and the directives thereof. First of all, I don't think that they're directives. I think that they are guidelines. And secondly, I'm not comfortable with a motion to mandate that the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union and all its member boards adhere to the memorandum and follow the memorandum's directives. Because we should be able to, as we just said, make changes as we want to, or you make changes as you want to. Or you under our advisement, or vice versa.
Mhm.
But saying that we are going to adhere to the directives under the memorandum.
Well, I agree, it was a memorandum and it probably wasn't directives, you're right. So if you can think of a better way to word that, I mean, I think we do want to adhere to,
Call it the opening protocols.
yeah, in other words, you want to, I mean, I see that as the floor, right? That's the baseline. And if we want to add to that, but I don't know the best way to say that. I mean, the directive from the state was pretty much what we've been talking about. First 10 days, universal masking. And in order for you to,
But it wasn't a directive from the state, it was a guideline.
yeah,
I mean, there
That's
are plenty of schools around the state that are just going universal masking, which as you just, as by your explanation, this is universal masking, but
Mhm.
there are plenty of SUs that are actually just going flat out universal masking. Simple, full stop, that's what I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to imply that we're adhering to a mandate.
Oh, we're not adhering to a mandate, that's for sure.
Or
No,
directive, because God knows, the Agency of Education has not sent us directives.
No, they have not. Sadly, they have not.
So.
Right.
So
So we could,
maybe as Larry was saying that,
Or you could simply, I mean, one way to do it would be, you could simply take out that first sentence, David, and you could just simply say the WSSU board gives the superintendent authority to modify our opening protocols as needed to provide a safe environment, blah, blah, blah.
yeah, just get rid of that first sentence.
Yeah.
No reference to the state really at all.
right,
And because these are, and then as we meet regularly and keep people informed.
I would also suggest that we should add a sentence that says that the superintendent will keep the WSSU board informed of any changes.
Yeah, I thought that was in there somewhere, but maybe it's not.
Interesting.
I guess it says he'll be responsive to board direction and public feedback. As conditions change, there'll be clear benchmarks. Yeah, so you could add it after that sentence there, that the WSESU board will be updated with respect to it.
yeah, the WSESU board and communities will be updated on a regular basis.
Or, I would rather be informed of any changes, not just, you know,
As they happen.
Yeah.
as they occur, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just trying to, yeah, I mean, I think we were pretty good about that last year, so I'm just trying to think of an occasion where I can't think of one really. I mean, where that couldn't happen, you know, I think it could happen. It's just that then you may get a lot of emails.
We'll give you a
but
solid
You,
3 hours, David.
that's good. You'll definitely be hearing from me.
I can't think of a weekly update where you didn't mention any change to the
Yeah.
COVID protocols.
No, I did it weekly, and I think that's probably what we'll do. We'll assess this weekly and
Yeah,
I'll just get back to sending out those. And I think the board was always copied on that, or they're part of that e-blast.
Yeah.
And I can confirm that. That's actually on my list to do.
That would be good,
I
yeah.
can confirm.
Yeah.
Obviously, the parents are, but
Yeah,
there
the
are board members who
might
aren't,
not be.
there are board members who aren't parents.
Right.
So,
but I received them,
yeah, so I'll just verify that
Yeah.
that's definitely happening.
but we.
And they go on the
were
website too,
informed.
and they go on the website too, and they go on
Yeah, we were
Facebook.
informed of any updates. I mean, you informed everyone
Yeah.
of what was happening on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
But if something happened on a Wednesday, we heard about it Wednesday night. and
Right.
You were,
If it was even reasonably significant, I would get it out.
yeah.
And that included, case count of positive
Yeah.
COVID tests.
Every
Yes.
positive
You know,
case.
we let people know.
Yeah.
We were generic and we didn't identify families or kids, but we let people know, and I think that's gonna be important. Let me ask a question. I know the word benchmark is in it, because I think benchmarks are important. I'm assuming that everybody on this, at this meeting tonight supports universal masking until 80% of our buildings are vaccinated. Is it, because that's the benchmark right now. Is that what we want? Is everybody okay with that? Because I'm sure that our community, I felt last year that our community did trust us quite a bit, and I think that you can hear from the voices, even a couple of community members that are on tonight. I mean, people and the board members, I mean, they want to do what's right for kids. So I'm not expecting huge pushback, but there will be some. And I just want to make sure that everybody agrees with that benchmark and whether or not we want to put that right in the motion. What do people think?
Could we perhaps have a second motion?
No, we could do that.
Yeah, I think we should
will
do that.
require
The initial,
universal
the initial,
These protocols are in place until.
Yeah.
Unless otherwise. And I think that's what you were on the top of the.
you could
protocols.
probably make it part of this motion. You don't have to, but you could.
Can I just add one more thing to the motion before us?
Sure.
Can you put something about, here we'll rely on guidance from the CDC and the state of Vermont? Because I was gonna say, right now we don't have an emergency order from the governor, but we might by the end of the calendar year.
We
We
might,
don't know,
who knows?
but,
Yeah.
but it says, but I don't know.
Yeah, we might by the end of September. We don't. know.
Yeah,
You
right,
know,
who knows?
Yeah.
You know what, part of this, what's interesting is it's sort of a double-edged sword, or a, what's the word I'm thinking about? It's a chicken or the egg. I mean, you know, we are in good shape because I felt like our state took the protocol seriously, mandated a lot of things that other states didn't mandate, and consequently, we did fine. So really, I think the question is, if we loosen up too much, you know, then we go back to a more restricted environment. And I think, Larry, you were the one that said this. I think the other thing we need to do in all of our communities, especially when the vaccination becomes available for younger children, is to really promote, encourage, advertise, have clinics right in our own building, vaccination clinics, you know, so that we know that we're serious about this and we really want to help you understand it and get it. Because a lot of times for parents, some of this is, even with the testing I noticed last year, it was access. Some people don't have transportation.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, I was thinking, we were thinking really hard about why the rate is lower than one might expect in Heartland Weathersfield. And I think it's because of the towns, like, again,
They're pretty
Westminster.
rural.
Yeah, and people work outside of the towns.
Right.
So, if you think about parents, whether they're going to be able to take off of work to be able to, I don't know, it just seems harder. Easier if there was something in the town, some clinics in the town.
Well, we were saying that there were no clinics in Weathersfield. Like,
Right.
there never was a vaccination
Right.
clinic there.
Right.
But I drove to Springfield.
I did too.
if-
So did a lot of
yeah,
Weathersfield folks, yeah.
I didn't. The ones that were in Windsor were very specific. to
And
a
limited.
certain population.
Right.
So, I mean, to say that, well, I didn't get vaccinated because it wasn't in my town.
If you don't have transportation though, that
Yeah.
could be an issue.
Yeah, that can be an issue.
But there were people, oh my gosh, some people were driving to Weston, and that's
Yeah,
where
yeah.
the state said, that's where you're going, and they were like,
Yeah.
oh,
My son's got
Okay.
vaccinated in Rutland.
yeah, yeah. And my daughter
Blood law.
went to Bellows Falls, so. Yes, Larry, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. So, David kind of mentioned a little bit. I think one of the things is, and one of the things I like about the universal mask mandating up to the 80% is it gives the target. And I think it, insofar as we make it so that we don't want people to say, what is the point of getting vaccinated if nothing changes? I think would hurt the vaccine rates and cause vaccine hesitancy. So anything you can do to provide a target so that this will someday be over, I think is huge, I think, especially for students and parents. So insofar as we have something where, like you mentioned before, some asked you to just say universal masking with no benchmark, I would personally, my fear about that would be that people would say, what's the point? Whereas here, it's obvious, 12 and under can't get it yet. Once that happens, now we have something to shoot for, and you can make it exciting for the kids. But hey, we're at 30%, let's get to 50. We're at 50, let's get it to 60. And we could, just like how Vermont has led
Yeah, true.
the country in vaccine,
Yeah.
we could create that same type of feeling among our SU. That's all.
And then we have a party, kind of like
Yeah.
graduation, when they toss
Mass
their-
burning party,
Yeah.
bonfire.
Well, no, I wouldn't do that. We
Well, I don't think it's gonna happen by October anymore.
But, like at
Yeah, imagine
graduation,
that.
when they throw their, up in the air, we throw our masks up in the air. Let me see, I have
Nancy has her
Katie
hands up.
Burke and Brian, Anne Marie, and Nancy, and then Corey. So Katie Burke.
Sorry. I just ended up typing my comment into the comment sections and basically just said, I think it's a mistake to remove the line about adhering to the state advisory memorandum. I think that should always be the bottom line, the bare minimum of what you do. Like, you never want to be on an island creating your own. You want to have some sort of fallback, right? And so, like, we're going to fall back on what the state and the Department of Health is telling us to do, and that's our bare minimum. And we're going to give the board and the superintendent permission to alter and add anything, in addition, if they can agree onto that guidance. I felt like that was a really important line, because I feel like we want to send this message that we're collaborating and we're seeing both sides and we're taking in all of the information, but also exercising our right as a community to make the decisions that we think are important.
Yeah, and Katie, if you look at that motion, it might, we might want to add the AOE in there, but it says, he will rely on guidance from the CDC and the state of Vermont, but we could add,
What if you add the agency, and the Vermont Agency of Education.
Yeah, and the Vermont Agency of
Including the Vermont
Education, yeah.
Agency of
Yeah.
Education.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, Katie, because you don't want to go rogue on any of those recommendations, right?
Actually, the line that we removed wasn't in reference to the state, it was in reference to our own, local COVID advisory memorandum, wasn't the state one. That was the line that was removed.
No, it was the state advisory.
Did it-
memo.
It doesn't say the state here, it just says, okay. So I thought we were talking about the protocols.
Can you put the Vermont Agency of Education?
What did I say, agency? Yeah.
And also, I'm sorry, can you also spell out what CDC is?
Just put it before you, mean. I just had a brain cramp. What is it? It's the Center for Disease Control. Should know that, like
Got a lot of acronyms.
yeah, and they do a pretty good job of coordinating. But if you notice, they're not always exactly the same, but you sort of take it all together. And are there other people in the queue?
Yes, there, so Anne Marie, did you already?
You can go Nancy first. Right?
Okay, Nancy?
Centers for Disease Control, David.
Okay. First of all, when I read the motion, I was worried and concerned that it just said superintendent has the authority. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can, Nancy.
Oh, okay. Because it's so quiet now. But when you were talking, David, you mentioned you would be talking to the principals and getting information. And I was glad to hear that. And I don't know if it needs to be said in the motion that you will be coordinating with each school. But it also says that this is just the opening plan. And it really, I think if we were going through all of this, it's more than just the opening plan. It's the plan as we go along, that we know how we're going to open. It's beyond that. So I think that really limits us. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's a good point, Nancy. And if you notice so we could get rid of opening there, I think if everybody agrees with that, and we could put down the COVID school plan as needed. But I think somewhere there I mentioned the COVID task force. Yeah, he will consult with the in-house COVID task force, and that is the administrative team, the nurses, and a union representative from each building. So we'll probably get back to regular meeting. Well, not probably. We'll get back to regular meetings with that group. We're meeting this Thursday, a matter of fact, to finalize the protocol. So,
Good. Thank you.
and I'll change the opening here. Is everybody okay if I take opening out? I'll just call it the COVID district plan. Does that work?
The district COVID plan?
The district COVID plan?
Mhm.
What's best, Elizabeth? District COVID plan?
Well, as you have it right now, it seems like COVID district is,
Yeah.
like COVID modifies district.
Yeah, we have a
Or
COVID district.
as it were.
District.
Oh, there you go. District COVID recovery plan.
I like that. You like that?
Yeah, that's from Katie Burke.
Nope, wrong place.
Nope.
Wrong place?
After COVID.
Yeah. That we all thought we had recovered. Capitalized plan too? Where are my English majors here? I was a math major.
Do you want me to
I'm
go?
doing the best I can.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make comments. I've received a couple of emails. One was from Scott Richardson, and he wants to throw his support behind this motion and giving Dr. Baker,
Authority.
the authority to do this. I have another email from Jamie Turner, and she's a little leery of giving David complete control, and I am to a certain extent as well. I'm wondering if there could, I know it's mentioned in there, well, I don't know, is there any way like that if once you essentially be responsive to board direction, but is there some way to put in there something more like if a decision is made, like say you just decide no masks, but at Weathersfield we feel like we still want to have masks for a little longer, that we could overrule if we feel like a decision isn't right for our school or for our particular situation.
I understand. I think though there's always that option, right, to either call an emergency meeting of this board or of
Right.
all the boards.
Revise the
Because I would imagine that knowing how well these boards work together, that if you had a problem, then so would Mount Scottney and so we just get an emergency meeting and we do it,
That's
you know?
unfortunately what we have done.
And we have done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have done it.
Okay, Corey Simons.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. Sorry. I actually I asked a question before you started with the letter. I just wanted to make sure I got it across before. So me and my wife, we were what you call essential workers, so we never stopped working last year. Therefore, my children never had to experience the mask mandates or anything like that. We actually had to put them in private school. So my question to you guys, as far as, the visitor protocol, I'm sorry to backtrack again. My child, who she will be starting first grade, she's, her first day at school. Me and my wife have religious exemption for reasons, personal beliefs. And I'm curious to see if you're honoring that so we can actually enjoy that first day with our child. Knowing my child, and you guys hopefully will know her as well at Weathersfield, she will be extremely nervous, and it will definitely inhibit her learning if we are not able to, be there with her in that school for that first day. For the drop off, I mean, obviously I'm not going to sit in my daughter's back pocket all day, but.
Yeah, I
It's
think,
exemption for the visitors.
Anne Marie asked, what, were you saying something?
I just was curious, I don't know what the plan, I would assume that, given the current circumstances, that parents won't be coming into the building that first day.
Yeah, I don't think it'll matter. And again, Brian, also the new principal, is on the line. I don't want to put him on the spot, and this is something probably, you can work out with him, but I think our general assumption based on, and this really has vaccinated, unvaccinated, it really won't matter, that we are really not going to allow the public in that building. That's the bottom line. So I know that's going to be difficult. And I know that last year, some of the teachers went outside, and I think building by building, we can work on those protocols. And I remember the kindergarten was a great example, because a lot of people are new to the building in kindergarten, and those kindergarten teachers, weather was permitting, and they met their classes, they met their kids outside, they met the parents outside, and then they went back into the building. So I think it's a good point, and we're going to have to work on it, but I think this will be one probably that in terms of inside, it'll be no exceptions, no excuses. I mean, that's just the way I think it is, Corey.
So my next question then, is there going to be any information for us, first time kiddos, parents before the school year even starts?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think what everybody's waiting for was to get all of this stuff sort of settled, and then to do the back to school letters. And there's a ton of information that goes out in those packets, including things like you said, how they're gonna greet kids in the morning. Each building does it a little bit differently. But you should be getting that information.
So it sounds like it's a question for Brian and the school at Weathersfield itself, not the, general group of the meeting. Is that correct?
Exactly,
And
exactly.
Corey, just for a peace of mind, or, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with COVID. Like, some schools have never let parents bring their kids in, and it has nothing to do with health. It has to do with like a separation and having the teacher meet the parents and the kids outside and then bringing the kids inside together. It just varies by school sometimes.
Oh yeah, David Baker, you were actually the assistant principal when I was at Hartford, so that's not how we did it up there. So I'm not familiar with that. So I appreciate that.
Oh no, there you go. That's great. I hope you didn't get in trouble.
No, not yet.
Right, behave yourself, or I'll have to pull out the old. But no, I think it's a great question for Brian, and
I would just like to personally invite Corey and his family to come on August 26th.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, we plan on it for sure.
It's unfortunately not going to be a barbecue anymore. We've decided
That's fun.
Food, but we are going to have try to make it as fun as we can.
little meeting. Yeah.
And we would love for you and your family to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, from a parent, I appreciate everything that you guys have done. I understand the struggle you guys are going through. It's just, there's a few of us here that have, kind of individual circumstances that are trying to plug into the whole as respectfully as we can. So, more information we can gain to make those decisions and is the better for us, and in turn help everybody out.
No, that's good, Corey. Thank you. And it's certainly my guess that, much like with other vaccinations, that religious exemption will live on. So I think that's where it's going to go. So, but thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you guys. Have a good night. I appreciate it.
No, you too, thanks.
Bye.
And Bill Yates, you are next. Bill, are you there?
Did Bill go to sleep on us?
I'm here. I just, the audio keeps cutting out and I didn't know it was my turn. My hand's been up for a little while, but basically I just wanted to point out that any resolution that the board passes, they can unpass.
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Was that your comment?
I think it was.
I think it was.
Yes.
Thank you. And Nikki.
Okay. With Bill's comment that we can undo anything we do, I would like to make the motion that the WSSU board gives the superintendent authority to modify the district COVID plan as needed to provide the safest environment under current conditions so that students can attend and remain in school for in-person learning. The superintendent is entrusted to continue and develop the details of the plan. He will rely on the guidance from the Center of Disease Control, CDC, the Vermont Agency of Education, and the Vermont Department of Health. He will consult with the in-house COVID task force. He will be responsible to the board direction and give public feedback as conditions change. The WSSU board and the community will receive updates related to any changes in protocol. There will be clear benchmarks for points at which adjustments to the plan will occur. That's it.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Nancy.
That was Nancy. David,
Yes.
can you take that off?
I can.
So
Matter
we
of
can
fact,
see everyone.
what I can do is I can stop sharing.
We're going to vote in just a moment.
And Wendy, I can send you that motion after the meeting, if you didn't get it. I think Wendy.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Is there any further discussion? I'm almost nervous to ask that. Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion as read by, please raise your hand. Okay, so I am seeing hands being raised and waved. Yay.
It looks unanimous.
Is there anyone who is opposed? And Anne Marie, are you opposed?
I raised my hand already.
Okay,
So that would be 8-0. I think we have 8 board members on.
correct.
Did you get that, Wendy? 8-0?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, we've had some very good discussion. I think it's all been very positive. We are starting school. We're not quite as tense and, there isn't quite as much confusion this year as there was last year with the hybrid situation, but there still is some concern. So I want to thank everyone for coming to this meeting and talking, and again, we care about kids and we want them to be in their classrooms and together and learning in person. So was there anything more we needed to do at this meeting?
Public session? I don't think so. I think thank Nikki especially for jumping on tonight.
Yes, thank you.
No, I think we're okay. Somebody mentioned a quick executive session, which we can do, but I think that's it for public session.
Right. So I will take a motion to.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Seconded.
Second.
Yeah,
Who was that did the motion in the second?
it was Elizabeth moved and Anne Marie seconded.
Thank
So
you.
board members, if you could stick on for a minute. Nikki, I know you want to get out of here, but just important for you to stay on just for a minute. And Christine, is Christine still on, or did Christine get off? Okay, she's off, so that's okay. We'll take it. I'm gonna stop recording now. And usually Nancy reminds me of that.
Stop recording, David.